it's only been like a day and a half. I feel like I got baptized and rebaptized, and I mean, Levon, Naomi, Flamey slayed me. So being with me is kind of like drinking from a fire hose. I just want to go ahead and warn you, those of you in the front row, if you need to move back, go ahead. I just want you all to be safe, right? This is a safe space. What I want to do, though, is I want to begin actually with a prayer. It's been a while since I preached. I have been teaching, a professor for a decade, and then I moved into coaching. But being here actually feels healing. So thank you, Kendall, for inviting me, and thank you, Brittany, also for opening us with the sound bowls this morning. Let us pray. Keep your eyes open or closed or whatever, do what you do. Great many one who goes by all the names of all the languages of all the people in all the world, but cannot be contained by any one of them. You are the great multiplicity, the original they, them. And we thank you for today, for NSP, for community, and for our oh so queer spirituality. What St. Audre Lorde once proclaimed, we claim for ourselves this day. Without community, there is no liberation. But community must not mean the shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist. Today we choose not to shed or shy away from our differences. Today we come together to not only claim our differences, but to celebrate, to commemorate, to elevate our difference as the promise and the path, the very personification of the divine. Thank you, Spirit of Life, for displaying your glory in our delightful, delicious, delectable, delovely, and indispensable difference, our divine diversity. And also thank you for alliteration. We are welcome at this table and at this altar. No sacrifice is necessary. What? Yes! You have sacrificed enough. You have sacrificed enough. No more. So this morning I need to make a confession. I'm going to come out. I am a morning person. Here we are. I know. So I needed to tell you that about as much as I need to tell you that I am a genderqueer, neuroatypical lesbian. It's pretty obvious is what I'm saying, right? I did say, right, drinking from me, oh, whoa, that was, being with me is like drinking from a fire hose. So get ready. Coming out and confession, right? Coming out and confession. I think it's important that we bring these two notions together, because today, right, you already know that I'm talking about queerness and faith. Queerness and faith. So both coming out and confession have their roots in the same tradition and framework. They're like so much of life, queerness and faith, paradoxical. Each, the union of ostensible opposites, they exist both and, the blessed both and. The Derridian pharmacon. Follow me. So pharmacon being both poison and antidote. I'll talk a little bit about pharmacon with you, then we're going to move into more about confession and coming out, queerness and faith. So in ancient Greece, the womb of much wisdom, right, and healing, but also of much destruction and devastation, let's be honest. The pharmakoi were exploited and enslaved peoples who, during trying times, times of famine, of plague, times of military invasion, they would be taken just outside the city, and these, the most vulnerable people, would be sacrificed in hopes that God would have mercy and save the remainder of the populace. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Sacrifice to appease an unpredictable God is an unjust practice that has existed since before recorded time. How do we know? I don't really know, because it wasn't recorded then. We imagine, though, right? Because it was then recorded. Anyhow, so Eve was sacrificed in the garden. Abel was Cain's sacrifice. All humanity in the flood, right? And then Abraham, or Ibrahim, depending on if you're reading, right, in the Torah, or if you're reading in the Quran, sacrificed, or was going to sacrifice, right, Isaac or Ishmael, but then, of course, the ram. And this was, by the way, meant to be then and signify the end of human sacrifice. But we all know, spoiler alert, this was not the end of human sacrifice, was it at all? No, it wasn't. But then there was a sacrifice that was really meant to end all sacrifices, right? I mean, this was the big one. The sacrifice of the God-man, right? Oh, you know him. Needs no introduction. Name above all names. Huh? The Lion of Judah, the sacrificial lamb himself, Jesus. Right? What we know, many of us in this room, in our own flesh and bones, is that there have been so many more human sacrifices, and still are human sacrifices. Palestinians, Indigenous Americans, Maoris, Aboriginals in Australia and Tasmania, Africans in the transatlantic slave trade, Jews, Guatemalans, Cambodians, Filipinos, Rwandans, Sudanese, Ukrainians, Uyghurs, Rohingyans. I would add anyone seeking asylum in the United States, right? Black people writ large, right? Women, people of color. I mean, I could go on and on. Trans people. Sacrificed in the name of God and on the altar of Western European Christian colonialism and cis heteropatriarchal capitalism. I'm not going to leave you here, don't worry, but we need to sit here for a little bit, right? That's a part of this. So the pharmakon, right, in ancient Greece, they were originally scapegoats sacrificed to God, but this term evolved. And it ended up, right, its semantic range included anything that was considered an agent of change. Some of y'all already know where I'm going with this, don't you? While still maintaining its ambivalent roots then, involving healing and deliverance as much as death and destruction, the pharmakoi expanded to include tinctures, pharmaceuticals, herbal, medicinal drugs, poisons, things used for purification, spells, etc. So interestingly, like the Hebrew word barak, for those of you who are Bible wonks, that means both blessing and curse. Did some of us know this? That the word, good, yes. The word barak actually means both blessing and curse. So its semantic range is so large that it includes its opposite. In other words, the only way to really know if something is a blessing or a curse is context, and actually we don't even know it all, do we? So for some of you who have been dabbling in other faith traditions, like myself, right, you would also know that this is similar to a Buddhist notion, maybe something that has a kind of resonances with non-attachment. In Hinduism, kind of maybe like non-difference. If we look in Taoism, it's what? Yin and yang. Yes, I appreciate this is good, I'm loving the movements, this is actually helpful. But this is it, right? We just don't know. We just don't know. And this obsession, right, with needing to compartmentalize either or, it is limiting us from seeing and being in the both and, the blessed both and. So I want you to think for a moment, and you're probably already there, But what is a pharmacon in your life, right? What is the thing in your life that is the poison and the antidote? So I'll give you an example. For me, right, it's been Christianity. It's been the Bible. It's been my queerness, right? But be with me right here in this moment, and I want you to let that sink in, right? What is it for you? There are these pharmacons for me, right, that are also confession and coming out. Confession and coming out. So the intersection then is that there's the potential both for debilitating shame and true liberation. So the practice of confession, right, goes way back. And I think we need to be really honest about the fact that it was an incredible method for social control, right, since the beginning. I think it still kind of is. I think back to, right, as we go even further back into this primary etiology, the creation myth in the garden, right, there was some confession there too, but when Adam had a chance, what did he do? He blamed it on Eve. Of course he did. You know why? Because he wasn't working the program, because of toxic masculinity, right? Because he didn't know about the triangle of change, you know? He was blaming. The conversation for another day. Confession is a pharmacon also with an implicit inequitable power dynamic. While it offers us a chance to state what we've done to harm ourselves or another and to hear that we've been forgiven, many of us have been led to believe that forgiveness is something only accomplished by a power outside ourselves. Historically represented as who? White, male, cis, omnipotent. Confession, as practiced since the dawn of the institutionalized church, conditions us to have faith in a shame machine, required to expose ourselves to a divinely sanctioned authority who knows us better than we know ourselves and has the power to forgive. Oh, the gospel of gaslighting. Ooh! This is why we're back in our bodies. While the psychological benefits of sharing indiscretions with an unbiased party are myriad and effectively embodied in therapy and healthy relationships, confession as a tool for social control has been devastating. So in order for confession to be liberating and healing, and it is, it requires an obliteration, or at least an inversion of the power dynamics that inhere in traditional Christian confession. In order for it to be effective, forgiveness, like self-love, must emanate from within us as much as it does outside. So coming out, as I see it, is a sort of confession, right? It can most certainly be affirming and emboldening, claiming our sexuality and our gender identity in dignity so as to no longer hide shamefully in the shadows, right? The very imagery of the closet entails this, right? This idea of hiding. It's also important to be visible to others so we know we're not alone. But coming out can also be a poison. Michel Foucault and Eve Sedgwick have reminded us of this, that it's another way that heteronormative society controls us under the power of the heteropatriarchal gaze. Remain invisible and acquiesce, or render yourself visible and help us maintain the clearly delineated hierarchical boundary between the imperial us, the royal we, and you. Whatever the hell you are. We're forced into a Hobson's choice, which then results in our traumatization either way. See, I was born into the Southern Baptist Church. Right? Says it all. You too. Yeah, okay, come on. Where you don't confess to a priest, but you are absolutely expected to confess and accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And this is your salvation and your sanctification. Failure to participate in sanctification this way doesn't result in your excommunication, but something much worse, your shamification, and your gossipification. The Southern Baptist Church is the church, as many of you know, that split off on the issue of slavery. Sinful, sinful, shameful past. They still refuse to ordain women. It's also a church where you are much safer staying in the closet if you want to stay in the church at all. As a born-again Southern Baptist, I was bred to believe that I was a sinner only saved by grace. I was also assigned female at birth, which meant that I was as evil as Eve. And my queerness, my gender queerness, and my homosexuality, they said, made me as depraved as the devil because I didn't know where I belonged, and I wasn't obeying God's divine order. These are my quandaries, and I was white. I mean, I couldn't imagine what it was like to be black or brown in the church, a church and a gospel that was used for enslavement and exploitation. The church is an even more complicated for complicated place for BIPOC because of the way Christianity has been used and been weaponized by Western European colonizers and enslavers. Being in the church, like being in a society already steeped in old-time religion, is poisonous, and yet the church has still been a place of healing for so many of us. So by the time I was 13, I had walked down the aisle of First Baptist Church, Pensacola, no less than 75 times. So that was averaging, right? What this means is I was averaging about 1 to 2 Sundays. I mean, since my baptism, 1 to 2 Sundays a month. Okay, so this is like 12 to 15 times. You are so with me. 12 to 15 times a year, which means that on any given Sunday, there was a 25 to 30% chance that by the time we got to that first chorus of Just As I Am, I was walking down that red carpet all the way up to the altar. So here's the thing, right? Yes. Okay, so here's the thing. The only reason that this stopped happening was not because I believed any longer that I believed now that I was finally saved, that I was going to heaven. The only reason that this discontinued is because my youth pastor in 1991 intercepted me. Brought me over to the front row, sat me down, and looked me in the eyes and said, "Paige, you're good. It is finished." So did we get that one? The Bible? Okay, reference. So it was wild though, right? It was wild. I mean, it took him actually stopping me to do, and I didn't stop questioning. I didn't. But Charlotte Elliott's sorrowful salvation hymn was no longer Pavlovian for me. You know what I'm saying? I was my anxieties were directed then, from this point on, into my performance, right? I became the most performatively Christian person you knew that I could be. A 3-sport varsity athlete, an honor student, 7 out of 10 senior superlative, school mascot, and the homecoming queen. I did not look like this. I just went, no, but it's true. Okay. President of FCA, and I dated the star of the baseball team. However, I am happy to tell you, I am still a gold star, baby. Yeah! I will not be colonized, not this pussy. Yeah. Hallelujah. So what I'm telling you is this. That while Jesus may not have saved me from homosexuality, Jesus saved me from the cock. Woo! Hashtag, Jesus was my wingman. Hashtag, Christ was my cock block. Wow. Right? This is how you do church. What? So here's the thing, though. I know, just marinate in it. I now understand, right? I now understand. That what was driving me to achieve and prove myself was that I was 100% trauma bonded to Jesus Christ in the name of the church. Trauma bonded to Jesus Christ. That the more Jesus was exalted, the more I was suppressed, the more I repressed, and the more pressure I was under to be something that I wasn't. The trauma bond was so strong for me that for me to assert or even entertain my needs, right, my desires, my dreams, became sinful, even satanic. An act for which I needed to prostrate myself and ask forgiveness. Jesus and I were inextricably linked in this unhealthy soul tie. And it was inversely proportional. He became greater, and I became less and less and less and less. Guilt and shame I'm getting to the good part, don't worry. We're getting there. Guilt and shame had been, it's all good though, isn't it? Yes. No, good and bad. Oh, I caught myself. Guilt and shame had been so deeply ingrained in me that I felt the urge to confess everything that bore any resemblance to an impure thought. Everything but the one thing that I thought could never be forgiven, right? The ultimate thorn in my flesh, and what I'd been told was akin to bestiality, to pedophilia, to adultery, and even to murder. I was a homosexual. So each time I was at the altar, I confessed everything, but it was never enough. I never felt clean enough. I never felt good enough. I never felt worthy. And I questioned my salvation every single day, every day of my life. As many of us know all too well that what you feed grows, right? And what you starve dies. The more energy I put into trying to stave off, to drive out those impure thoughts, the more they haunted me. And I became such a regular at Bible roulette. Anybody here? Yeah, right? I became such a regular at Bible roulette that I had worn those passages, 7 clobber passages. There was a 95% chance I was going right there to what condemns us or has been interpreted as such. So at 20, with a degree in religion and sociology under my belt, I left the U.S. for Singapore to serve in an Antioch church plant as a youth pastor. So I go to Singapore, and I'm excited. I'm going to save souls for Christ. The only problem is simultaneously I'm like, why am I doing this? Do these people really need to be saved by Jesus? Isn't this a part of the problem? This whole time, right? All these doubts in the back of my head. So I end up telling the pastor this. I end up being honest with him. And this is after, I know. I'm an 8. I'm an Enneagram 8. Just like, is that going to be hard? I want it! Give it to me! You don't want to talk about what? Huh? My partner knows this all too well. Yeah, she's a 7 too. That's real fun for us. Actually, it is. It's been amazing. I love you. Oh my gosh, I love you, Annie. Isn't it so great to be with people and we can just speak our language together? Or just sit here and stare at each other and just be loving each other, just looking and loving. Okay, so I go to Singapore and I decide, I was at the altar actually. It was like an all-night prayer meeting because this was a Pentecostal church. I'd gone from Baptist to, anyway, much of you probably, and I'm down, I'm crying, and I'm making light of this. It was actually a really difficult time. So I go back to his house, all-night prayer meeting. It's probably like 3 in the morning, and we're in Singapore. It's like hot as hell. I was just sweating and feeling like, and then anyway, I'll get to it. So I say to my pastor and his wife, he's like, what is going on with you, Paige? You're in no shape to minister to anyone else. You're broken down. And I looked at him and I said, I have to be completely honest with you. I don't know if I believe that Jesus came to save all the world. I don't know if I believe that the Bible is inerrant. I don't know. And also, I think I'm gay. Right? I just was like, let me just get it all out. Right? It was like Chunk in, has anyone seen Goonies? Like just everything to the Fratellis, right? Just, and then I was in the movie theater and I threw up on the lady. Right? I had to get everything out. It was like all or nothing for me. And he looked at me and his wife, they were just, they looked at me and he said, "How dare you? How dare you? You are the most spirit-filled person I had ever met. What a deceiver. You are filled with a demon of homosexuality and a demon of unbelief, and we are going to pray that out right now in the name of Jesus Christ." And so that's what happened. For the next 5 years of my life, I did what I call the holy hokey pokey, and I put my whole self into reparative therapy. And I just did it. I did it. And I mean, just like Flamey was saying last night, I think you all heard, right? They say that about 5 years you should be good. Well, they're wrong. I got news for you. So 5 years, and I go through exorcisms. I was under surveillance. I was in camps. I was in pseudo-psychotherapy with a group called NARTH, just absolutely disgusting. Exodus, Living Waters. I had to go through courses. I spent thousands of dollars. One of the most interesting things, they were trying to re-socialize me in the proper dress, desire, and decorum of a lady. That was really interesting. Yeah, I know, I agree, so bad. So what ends up happening is 5 years later, I find myself, after all of this, 60 pounds lighter. And I'm a lightweight already, right? 60 pounds lighter in Florida, and I've got both upper and lower GI issues. You all know. Yeah, the body keeps the score. So here I am in the hospital. I mean, it's all CPTSD. I'm in the hospital, and I'm lying there, and this is where things start to change, right? After all this abuse, the ex-gay indoctrination, internalized self-loathing, what finally led me to salvation wasn't Jesus, it wasn't Christianity, and it wasn't all this that I had done to try to heal myself from homosexuality. What did it was one simple phrase uttered by the only out lesbian that I knew at the time. Booth was her name. Booth. Isn't that interesting too, for those of you who know the Bible? Booth, yeah. So she sits down. I was alone at this point, and she sits down next to me, and she takes my shriveled sallow hand, and she looks in these blurry blue eyes. Oh, by the way, so she'd been seeing my girlfriend come in and out at night. Sneak. So she sits down next to me, and she looks me in the eyes. And she says, "Paige, God loves you just the way you are." I mean, I started bawling. You know what's wild, though? It wasn't the words. I mean, though they're important words, right? So important. But it wasn't the words. It wasn't Booth. What it was for me was that I was seen. That I was seen. And in that experience, what I realized was that all those lies that I'd been told prevented me from doing the one thing, the only thing that I actually needed to do to truly be saved, to truly know liberation, right? Love myself and love the God that is alive in me. And that's it. I mean, that's it, right? To be able to love that God. And I came to see, right? If that God could not love and embrace and believe in me, that is no God that I want to believe in. I don't want any part of that. Days later, I'm discharged from the hospital, and And once again, I regain my strength. I'm able to walk, right? So what I decide to do as soon as I can walk is, of course, rent a U-Haul. And move with my girlfriend to San Francisco, right? Right? I'm gonna go to the gay capital. This is my Mecca, right? So I go, and what was so amazing about this, right, is that I as I'm coming out, I don't at that point decide to leave the church. In fact, I go more fiercely into it, right? I do whatever I can to reframe, right, to reclaim, to research my faith, the Bible. So I end up going and I'm studying the Bible, religion, the human psyche. I get a Master of Divinity, a Master's in Biblical Languages, certificate in Sexuality and Religion, right? Instead of being ordained, which at the time I had been in the church for probably about 8 or 9 years, I decided to get my PhD and then other certifications. But the other amazing thing, right, is that I begin to enjoy the benefits of legitimate psychotherapy, right? And queer polyamory. That too. Here. Oh, not as many fans in here. Okay, so but I live. That one didn't hit. Okay, but so I lived all over the Bay. I served as a teaching pastor at Glide Memorial. I traveled to Africa, to the Gacaca courts, right, and reparations after the genocide, to the Philippines on fact-finding missions for the disappeared, to Malaysia leading graduate students in interfaith dialogue, and to Jamaica to study and to teach with my Jamaican lesbian Methodist minister mentor. Althea, I love you. So this, my second coming out, right? This was characterized not by shame and guilt and fear, but by liberation, elevation, revelations about myself and about society. I began to see connections between my genderqueer lesbian experience and the experience of other marginalized groups, right? This then helped to explain why I connected more with my BIPOC friends than my cis-het white ones, right? I'm like, oh yeah. And it led me to stand in solidarity with those friends through anti-racist activism. I had grasped the social construction of reality in undergrad, right, through sociology, and religion, but once I no longer needed to defend Christianity or the Bible, I could allow my curiosity, my imagination, and my faith to run wild. This also helped me to identify the ways that the Bible, right, had been weaponized against all non-normative bodies. I understood the way in which identity constructs like race and class and gender, sexuality, religion, ethnicity, ability are intimately related to the Western colonial enterprise, and therefore white racial supremacy and heteropatriarchal social system, the one in which we live. I knew in my body, just like Dr. King said, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Right? So our struggles, the struggles against anti-black racism, against anti-immigrant legislation, and against Islamophobia are no different from the fight for reproductive rights or gender-affirming care. It's all the fucking same. Thank you, Audre Lorde. I also knew that if, in fact, there were a historical Jesus, he was a brown man, and he was a Palestinian Jewish immigrant who would have been fighting right alongside with us, praying for and protecting our rights. In those years of graduate school and teaching, I read Fanon and Foucault. I won't go into all their names, but I have an obsession with Edouard Glissant, who I would encourage you to read Glissant. And they became my interlocutors as I interpreted the Bible, right? Then there were these creative possibilities, my queries, they opened up so many opportunities for reinterpretation, and the Bible itself then became a pharmacon. The text once used to control and abuse, right, the poison, I was now able to reinterpret toward healing and empowerment. It became the antidote. So I want to give you one example of one that I like in particular. But so right, Genesis 1-3, which I think is really cool. I don't know if anyone has noticed, but that's actually what's been opened here in our ginormous Bible that no one ever reads, but is sitting here and is very dusty and old and probably going to fall apart if I touch it anymore. But so Adam and Eve and Adam and Steve, right? That passage, the one that's supposed to be right, defending or justifying, right, compulsory heterosexuality, right? That's what I started to see. But before, what I thought it was about, creation versus evolution. And also the binary gender system, right? That is too what it's about. But so what was interesting as I began to read this passage, right, is that I start to see this compulsory heterosexuality. I start to see Adam as archetypal man, right? And Eve is archetypal woman who's duped this man. She's the perpetual problem and the sinful scapegoat. And then the serpent, right? I had previously been told that it was Satan. But then as I started to read other wisdom traditions, I realized, wow, oral cultures across the world for centuries, they didn't think a serpent was evil. What did they think it was? I'm sure you all know. Wisdom, transformation, right? Absolutely. Even enlightenment. But this is my favorite part. As I started to read it, I realized, wait a second. Okay, so Eve's punishment was pain in childbirth, right? But it was also, her punishment, right, was also that her desire would be for her husband and he would rule over her. Wait a second. Why would desiring her husband be a punishment? Oh, no. Why would desiring her husband be a punishment? Because she didn't already desire him. Why? Oh, Eve was a lesbian, or at the very least, a bisexual. What I'm telling you is this. Eve was queer. Queer as faith. So here's the thing. I began to look at oh, Lord. Don't you love that, right? I mean, why else would it be a punishment if she wasn't already doing it? So once I began loving myself and living into my questions, right, I no longer needed to contort, conform, or cut out parts of myself, right? I no longer needed to sacrifice myself for the gospel. I could embrace my Paige-ness, my pain and my pleasure, my queerness and my faith in self-compassion and celebration. Rather than deprecation, I experienced elevation. What? Huh? Elevation right out of institutional life. So I left the ministry and I left academia and I started my own business as a life coach. So touching my trauma enabled deep transformation, and as a result, I wanted to empower others into the same thing. And that is exactly what I do for a living now, and I'm so grateful to be able to do that. So the more I was able to become radically present to my own life, I was able to open authentically to other people, to bear witness and to walk with them through their own hurt into healing and self-exploration and self-love. I now give my clients what Booth gave to me. Okay, I'll wrap up here. There's so much more I want to share with you, but I guess, Shay, we can have a conversation because I feel like I've been talking for a while, right? Okay, all right. Just checking in. So what I'd been impelled to believe was diabolical and needed to be exorcised out of me, in fact, became the source of my liberation. Right? What the church and pastors, my community, had represented as the poison was my antidote. Not the cause of my sickness, but the source of my healing. So instead of casting those demons out, I needed to love those demons, to embrace those demons, to listen to those demons and to learn from them. Because then what I realized, they weren't demons at all. They were my deliverance. Even as confession is often couched in shame, judgment, and unequal power dynamics, so is my first coming out. But my second coming out, that was sacred. That was holy. It was a confession that inaugurated my emancipation, education, and my elevation. But it was only through my realization that there is no difference between my queerness and my faith. It was not my queerness, but what the church told me about myself and my queerness that had poisoned me to the point of disease and almost death. My queerness and acceptance of myself as queer was, to the contrary, the only thing that could save me, heal me, and set me free. So here's the thing. As far as I'm concerned, my friends, there is absolutely nothing that is queerer than faith. And I can go on and talk to you about why this is, right? But the same things, right? Queerness, and maybe I'll kind of wrap it up here and then we can take a break and Shay, we can keep talking. But so the word queer, right, comes from a German word, right? And that word means oblique, right? So not straight, and transverse. It transgresses boundaries. Are you with me? So when we think about queer and the definition of queer, and I could expound on this for days and the rest of my life, and I will continue to do so. When we think about the definition of queer, right? Nonconformist, strange, abnormal, different, right? Pushing the boundaries, disruptive, deconstructive, all these words that we use to describe faith. The same thing, or to describe queer, I'm already saying it, describe, could also be said of faith. It's counterculture, right? Faith, real faith is living. Real faith challenges us. Real faith it exists in the blessed both and, right? In the interstices. It straddles these lines of opposition, right? And so maybe we can continue to sort of talk through that in our next few minutes together. But yeah, I have a ending. Okay, I'd like to say it. Is that all right? I know. You're like, dear Lord, Paige, gracious, this has been very long. Well, I told you, it's like a fire hose. You can, yeah, okay. So as far as I'm concerned, let's go back to my script. There's nothing queerer than faith, nothing more subversive than spirituality, and especially queer people who have faith. Hi. When we've been told by conventional institutional religion that we don't belong or we can't claim faith ourselves, as queer people, we force the rest of humanity to face their limitations.
Rewind. Say it again.
Rewind. As queer people, we force the rest of humanity to face their limitations. Right? And their fears of the unknown and the uncontainable, that which is mysterious and ineffable and beyond our containment and comprehension, in short, the divine. Oh, yes. The very people the church has excluded, disqualified, and sacrificed, the ones viewed as poison, are in fact the antidote and an integral part of the healing, salvation, transformation, and even the liberation of the world. We are the blessed both and. We are the pharmacon. We are the agents of change, and we will no longer be sacrificed at this altar. And by the way, us queers, we're also single-handedly solving the problems of famine, overpopulation, and climate change, but that's another conversation for another day.